So now it's my distinguished honor to introduce the 4th Annual Ocean Forum's keynote speaker. Keisha Santiago Martinez is at the forefront of efforts to advance sustainable, equitable, and resilient development, to expand New Yorkers' access to offshore wind energy, to improve climate resiliency and mitigation at regional and local levels, and to protect and restore the state's coastal and ocean ecosystems. As the head of the Office of Planning, Development, and Community Infrastructure, Ms. Santiago Martinez oversees a wide range of significant policy initiatives and programs. These include New York State's Downtown Revitalization Initiative, New York Forward, the New York State Coastal Management Program, including the state's Coastal Consistency Review Authority through the Federal Coastal Zone Management Act, Ocean and Great Lakes Program, and is a member of the Governor's Climate Leadership Action Council and former chair of the 5-state Mid-Atlantic Regional Council on the Ocean, just to name a few. To achieve sustainable community development, Ms. Santiago Martinez oversees 6 signature planning and development programs: New York's Downtown Revitalization Initiative, New York Forward, the local Waterfront Revitalization Program, the Smart Growth Program, Brownfield Opportunity Area Program, and the Lake Ontario Resiliency and Economic Development Initiative. The DRI, or Downtown Revitalization Initiative, is the cornerstone of the state's economic development programs, transforming downtown neighborhoods into vibrant centers that offer a high quality of life and are magnets for redevelopment, business, job creation, and economic and housing diversity. New York Forward revitalizes small and rural downtowns with a focus on building local capacity. The LWRP is aimed at helping communities activate their waterfront assets while strengthening their resilience to climate change. The BOA program, or Brownfield Opportunity Area Program, creates effective revitalization strategies that turn blighted and formerly contaminated areas into productive and economically viable communities. The Smart Growth Program provides grants for an array of activities and implementation strategies, such as resiliency and comprehensive planning grants, and transit-oriented development supportive zoning. Ms. Santiago Martinez is honored to serve on a range of high-profile management boards and committees, including representing the Secretary of State on Climate Action Council and the South Shore Estuary Reserve Council. She's a board member of the Adirondack Park Agency, Great Lakes Commission, SUNY Construction Fund, and the National Heritage Trust. Prior to joining the Department of State, Ms. Santiago Martinez served in the Governor's Executive Chamber, first as Assistant Secretary for Housing and later as Assistant Secretary for State Operations, General Government, and Technology. During her term as Assistant Secretary for Housing, the State Housing Agency, Homes and Community Renewal, set back-to-back records for creating or preserving affordable housing, negotiated rent laws helping to strengthen long-term affordability for more than 1 million New Yorkers, and spearheaded the interagency Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative that created 6,000 units of supportive housing through capital and operating grants. In her second post, she pushed large-scale operational and interagency improvements, as well as the stand-up of the successful Downtown Revitalization Initiative. While working in the Executive Chamber, Ms. Santiago Martinez's agency portfolio, including Housing and Community Renewal, the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery, the Department of State, including the Coastal Management Program, the Office of General Services, Information and Technology Services, and the Roosevelt Island Operating Corporation. Ms. Santiago Martinez came to the Executive Chamber after serving as Assistant Commissioner for Budget and Operational Strategic Management at HCR, where she led a team of budget analysts and project managers who helped guide the development, alignment, implementation, and management of the agency's strategic and transformational initiatives. During that time, she served as the agency's liaison to the Governor's Executive Chamber and Division of Budget for the $1 billion House New York initiative. And she was vital to the quick implementation of the Governor's Home Ownership Repair and Rebuilding Fund after Hurricane Sandy, and planned the foundation for the New York Rising Community Reconstruction Program. Ms. Santiago Martinez's introduction to New York State government was through the Empire State Fellowship. Prior to joining state government, Ms. Santiago Martinez served as Vice President and Senior Project Manager at Rosenberg Housing Group, a private affordable housing development company that specializes in working with public housing authorities on mixed finance projects. During her term, she served on the development team that successfully bid to redevelop New York City Housing Authority's Prospect Plaza, and as a Hope 6 coordinator for 2 HUD Hope 6 revitalization grants, helping to develop the With Every Heartbeat is Life community health worker initiative in Chester, Pennsylvania. Ms. Santiago Martinez's professional experience also includes program and development assistance at Youth Build's flagship site in Harlem, general management at Walt Disney Theatrical Productions, and agency advancement and community outreach at Parsons Child and Family Center. Ms. Santiago Martinez graduated cum laude and magna cum laude with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and a Master's in Regional and Urban Planning with a concentration in Housing and Community and Economic Development at the State University of New York at Albany, and she is a Certified Lead Green Associate. She's held several memberships and board positions, including the National Housing Conference's Board of Trustees, the National Housing Conference's Young Leaders in Affordable Housing, the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials, Citizens Housing and Planning Council, the Urban Green Council's Emerging Professionals, the New Leaders Council Capital District Chapter, and the Pride Center for the Capital Region. Whether developing plan-to-act strategies with extensive public engagement to empower and revitalize communities, or ensuring that projects balance economic and environmental concerns, the broad-based programs that Ms. Santiago Martinez administers at the Department of State have a profound and lasting positive impact on New York's communities, economies, and ecosystems. Ms. Santiago Martinez is a planner with a deep commitment to public service who seeks to partner closely with government and community leaders as she works to advance appropriate, equitable, and resilient development across New York. So again, it's my honor to introduce Ms. Santiago Martinez, and please take it away.
Hi. Well, you said you were going to read the whole thing, and you really did read the whole thing.
I did.
Good morning, everybody. This has been a huge year, and if we were all in the room together, I would cajole you all to stand up and give a round of applause to some of the incredible milestones and achievements. I'd like to highlight a few at the federal level, and so feel free to do some finger snaps while we are all on mute, because it will certainly suffice. Last year, Congress passed the Bipartisan and Historic Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, which will provide resources and support for infrastructure improvements. IIJA includes several provisions for addressing coastal and ocean issues. And I'd like to congratulate NOAA on the additional support coming through for critical programs, including, but certainly not limited to, the coastal zone management, the National Estuary and Research Reserves, ocean observing, and of course, regional ocean partnerships like MARCO, NROC in the Northeast, WACOA and GOMA in the Gulf of Mexico. Also, I'd like to congratulate the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, FEMA, and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, all of whom have received funding in support of protecting, restoring key coastal and nearshore habitats, bolstering hazard mitigation programs, and improving resilience to climate impacts and other natural disasters. I would also like to congratulate BOEM, who has just been an incredible partner on their unprecedented progress to accelerate offshore wind to achieve the ambitious climate goals of the Biden-Harris administration, while also keeping their commitment to creating good paying union jobs. We also need to applaud the U.S. Department of Interior's recent $46 million in funding announcement to address the impacts of climate change in indigenous communities, which include investments that support climate resilience and adaptation, ocean and coastal management, and community-driven relocation. In terms of major anniversaries, great congratulations to NOAA on the 50th anniversary of the Coastal Zone Management Act, Clean Water Act, Marine Mammals Protection Act, and the National Marine Sanctuaries Act. I am so pleased to be here to help kick off the 4th annual Mid-Atlantic Ocean Forum. While I come to you representing the state of New York, I'm confident that I can speak for all 5 Mid-Atlantic states when I say that our region's ocean and coast are home to some of the most culturally, environmentally, and economically vibrant areas, which is why these areas are in such high demand and why we are compelled to balance the multiplicity of interests involved. From tourism, maritime commerce, and transportation, critical habitats that support endangered wildlife, offshore wind energy development, and more. Sometimes it seems like every square inch of our marine space is occupied by one important element of the human and natural environment or another. These competing uses span state borders, regulatory jurisdictions, ideologies, stakeholder interests, and so while it's critical that we all continuously talk and learn from one another, that also captures the very essence of MACO. which provides an open collaborative forum for state staff to build meaningful relationships with other states, federal agencies, Fishery Management Council, and tribal nations, and vice versa. The Department of State is working hard to implement New York Governor Hochul's ambitious energy and climate goals, many of which cannot be accomplished without the coordinated efforts of regional initiatives like MARCO and MACO. Mitigating climate change, investing in the responsible development of renewable energy, and ensuring equitable distribution of benefits that result from our efforts. These are the currents that are carrying New York's ocean work right now. And New York is proud to be part of the collective chorus of MARCO and MACO, with its diverse sectors, geographies, and stakeholders. This coordination across sectors is becoming even more important as climate change impacts our ocean and coastal resources, communities, and its habitats. And I want to talk to you all today about how two seemingly unrelated fields, community development and ocean planning, merge together to create a vision of equity and resilience in the face of rapidly changing climate. I see this connection every day in a variety of New York initiatives. This vision is an area of focus and emphasis for us. Underserved communities, such as vulnerable populations living close to our waterways, are disproportionately and at an increased risk of damage due to climate change impacts like increased frequency and severity of storm, sea level rise, changing ocean chemistry, and more. These same communities are often left out of the discussions related to climate mitigation and adaptation strategies. They are not just overburdened with environmental injustices, neglect, and a lack on public and private investment, but they are under-resourced with limited tax revenues to prepare for and react to severe climate events. I'm proud to say that New York State is prioritizing environmental justice in our programs and funding as we work to mitigate and adapt to climate change. I oversee several community development programs at the Department of State that reflect MACO's mission and worldview. You'll notice that a key theme throughout all of these meaningful engagements and stakeholders, engagement of stakeholders and investments in underserved communities. New York's local Waterfront Revitalization Program, or LWRP, for example, allows us to work in partnership with waterfront communities across New York State. The program addresses local and regional coastal and inland waterway issues, improves water quality and natural areas, directs development to areas without adequate infrastructure and services away from sensitive resources, promotes public waterfront access, and provides for redevelopment of underutilized waterfronts. The local Waterfront Revitalization Program is state-funded and awards approximately $10.5 million per year to projects that are specifically in communities where a substantial portion of the residential population is of low income or is otherwise disadvantaged. To put that into perspective, this year we were allocated $16.3 million, so over 60% of available funds will go to underserved communities. The LWRP also offers a match reduction for projects located in environmental justice communities and has several requirements meant to maximize public engagement to ensure participation from populations who are frequently underrepresented in this process, such as immigrants, refugees, and minorities. The LWRP also integrates resiliency planning, which better equips communities with the information needed to implement both short and long-term strategies for handling severe weather events. Understanding risk on the landscape enables communities to better understand where proposed development is at the greatest or least risk from flooding and erosion hazards. The LWRP is just one of many programs at the state, all which are guided by the integration of the 3 E's of smart growth and sustainability, equity, environment, and economy. All state agencies are marching to meet the bold goals set by Governor Hochul. New York State's passage of the Climate Leadership and Protection Act, which is among the most ambitious climate laws in the world, requires New York State to reduce economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030 and at least 85% by 2050 from 1990 levels. The development of offshore wind energy is a crucial part of our strategy to achieve this major greenhouse gas emission reduction goal. In fact, the Climate Act requires the development of 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind energy by 2035. As proof of continued commitment to make New York a leader in offshore wind and renewable energy, Governor Hochul announced in January a nation-leading $500 million investment in offshore wind as part of the 2022 State of the State. This plan will directly invest in offshore wind manufacturing, manufacturing, and supply chain infrastructure, creating thousands of good-paying green jobs, delivering billions in economic impact, and generating enough energy to power millions of homes. This is absolutely fantastic, and I'm so proud that New York is moving toward a future with greener energy, and that we've already taken several steps towards ensuring that the benefits of that future are received equitably. The Climate Act recognizes that climate change doesn't affect all communities equally and requires that at least 35% and as much as 40% of the benefits of clean energy investments be directed to disadvantaged communities, similar to President Biden's Justice 40 executive order, which requires 40% of assistance be directed to disadvantaged communities. The Climate Justice Working Group was created by the Climate Act to develop criteria for identifying disadvantaged communities to help and ensure that frontline and otherwise underserved communities benefit from the state's historic transition to cleaner, greener sources of energy. The Climate Justice Working Group is comprised of representatives from environmental justice communities statewide, including 3 members from New York City communities, 3 members from rural communities, and 3 members from urban communities in upstate New York, as well as representatives from relevant state agencies, including the Department of State of Environmental Conservation, Health, Labor, and NYSERDA. The Climate Justice Working Group also reviewed and provided input on all of our recommendations from the land use, local government, and transportation sector in the draft Climate Action Plan, Scoping Plan. In addition, our sister agency, NYSERDA, is doing just an incredible job, not just in meeting the governor's challenge, but also influencing agencies in New York State and other states as well, as we focus on renewable energy and a comprehensive climate response. In NYSERDA's first 2 offshore wind procurements, they contracted with projects that will together produce nearly 2,500 megawatts, enough to power 1.3 million homes. This is just one of the steps New York State is taking to achieve our ambitious climate goals. NYSERDA also organizes the State of Science workshop led by the New York State Environmental Technical Working Group. This has become the biggest wildlife conference on offshore wind in the country, maybe even the world. The last biannual workshop generated comprehensive cumulative impact analysis for a range of taxonomic groups, with the work on data gaps being used to inform next steps in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. And there's still time to register to join this year's workshop in July, so please check that out. Our other sister agency, the Department of Environmental Conservation, has been busy at work to complete the 2022 State of the Ocean Report, which will highlight the first 5 years of implementing New York State's Ocean Action Plan, which works to ensure ecological integrity of the ocean ecosystem, promote economic growth, coastal development, and human use of the ocean in a manner that is sustainable and consistent with maintaining ecosystem integrity, increase resiliency of ocean resources to impacts associated with climate change, and empower the public to actively participate in decision-making and ocean stewardship. They're also continuing to develop new actions in support of the Ocean Action Plan, including multi-trophic ocean monitoring systems to provide information that allow managers to evaluate risks, track effectiveness of management actions, anticipate climate change, and better inform decision-making. And the completion of a large whale monitoring service, which was published in the fall of 2021. Our state, as well as many states in the Mid-Atlantic, have ambitious goals for renewable energy that complement the Biden-Harris administration's goal to deploy 30 gigawatts of offshore wind energy in the United States by 2030. Our hope is that some of the work we're doing in New York can inform national offshore wind interests, particularly as it relates to equity and offshore wind development. We are excited to be a part of the greater Mid-Atlantic regions and the federal government's success in achieving renewable energy goals. This is further evidence that cooperation and collaboration are essential for large-scale, meaningful change. In January of this year, the state of New York and New Jersey and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management announced that they were coordinating closely in the transition to a clean energy future that will help ensure well-paying jobs are created and establish a durable domestic supply chain. New York and New Jersey have some of the largest offshore wind goals, and this collaboration with BOEM will facilitate the responsible development of offshore wind industry and deliver benefits to residents of the states, including underserved, disadvantaged, and overburdened communities. The three partners have established a New York, New Jersey bi-regional working group on supply chain development, which is working to, among other things, identify whether communities potentially impacted by offshore wind development are underserved, disadvantaged, or overburdened, and define what constitutes mitigation opportunities for these communities, and promote accountability by identifying best practices for sharing information on how developers are meeting supply chain and underserved community goals. We hope this will serve as a model for MACO to identify complementary opportunities at a regional scale. Renewable energy is a climate mitigation solution, but we need to come together to explore additional strategies beyond that. Climate change is no longer a distant threat, and we are already seeing the impacts. Many of you on today's call know too well what I'm talking about, and I'm hopeful that our shared vision for a healthier planet, for leaving the next generation better off than we are today, will propel us forward into finding solutions at many scales, globally, nationally, regionally, and among individual communities. Harkening back to the intersection between community development and ocean coastal planning, New York takes the view that healthy economies are reliant upon healthy ecosystems. You just can't have one without the other, and our resiliency planning effort reflects that theme. We help communities prepare for and adapt to climate change impacts by implementing solutions that have multiple benefits for people and habitats. Leveraging natural features can often be the cost-effective way of providing community protection against sea level rise. Natural features like salt marshes also store carbon, making them both a climate change adaptation strategy and a mitigation strategy. We call these areas blue carbon, which is just a fancy name with a simple principle: sequester and store carbon on our coastal and marine environments. The co-benefits of coastal habitat protection are numerous. Ecologically, marshes serve as a nursery to many commercial important species, providing food for larger marine animals and migrating birds, and supporting important commercial and recreational fishing industries. Coastal marshes also retain soil, which can help protect coastal communities from rising sea levels and damage from intense storms and hurricanes. New York's waterways are a foundation for local cultural heritage and identity. Beautiful beaches and waterfront parks are a place of solitude for residents with positive impacts on our mental health. And quaint waterfront towns are a main driver for tourism, and waterfront and water-dependent businesses depend on seasonal visitors for prosperous business to secure enough revenue to get through the off-season. Curbing climate change and sea level rise will also benefit critical infrastructure and housing, and help identify the investments needed for vulnerable communities to adapt. The message is clear. Greater coastal resiliency has to be a priority for ecological, economic, and human benefit. And New York is tackling resiliency through specific planning efforts, promotion of natural and nature-based solutions, guidance on managed retreat, and developing tools for communities to understand their relative risk to climate change impacts. We have identified basic principles of resiliency so we can communicate effectively to communities and ensure implementation of those fundamental principles across all New York State programs. We've talked a lot about climate adaptation, mitigation, and equity on the coast, and as it relates to offshore wind development. But I would be remiss if I didn't give a special nod to the deep sea habitats that are just 100 miles off the coast of New York. The Hudson Canyon and dozens of smaller canyons cutting along our outer continental shelf have remarkable biodiversity of deep sea corals and sponges, some of which have potential anti-cancer and antiviral properties. Within the last decade, exploration of these underwater canyons has increased, revealing secrets that lie within. Octopus, bivalves, skates, and even whales will visit or live in these canyons. And all of this productivity attracts shorebirds to the area. Important commercial fishes like summer flounder and black sea bass will spend their winters there. The value of these underwater habitats has even led to the nomination of Hudson Canyon as a national marine sanctuary. The Biden-Harris administration's 30 by 30 initiative combat the impacts of climate change and biodiversity decline by protecting more natural areas, which will certainly assist in protecting precious resources. Finally, the ocean is vast, but with so many competing interests, it's important to carefully consider spatial planning. The Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal has thousands of map layers showing important ocean uses such as commercial fishing and navigation, human uses, fish and marine mammal migration, and more. This regional scale data is used in New York agencies' day-to-day work and planning for new uses and management of current ones. The Department of State also has mapping tools we call the Geographic Information Gateway, commonly referred to here as just the Gateway. And we have initiated so much work throughout the state, which includes mapping environmental justice data sets so that we are identifying diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice factors that will affect communities. This mapping effort will identify communities and neighborhoods in the state that are disadvantaged or underserved in a more inclusive and all-encompassing way. And we hope that it will help to aid agencies in deciding which communities can receive additional resources and help to create transparency of the resources that are being invested. The other thing that we are trying to do is bring the young folks who are in school into data understanding so that they can be better stewards and increase their civicism and awareness of resiliency, as well as issues that are affecting their community. It's a great way of bringing young people into STEM and making sure that we can build upon our inclusion. So we're coming a little bit towards the end, and I want to say a few things before wrapping up. One is a little bit of a frank conversation with regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that is the importance of identifying a broad, sweeping way of being more inclusive. It is not enough to check the box, and it is not enough to find a speaker. What we really need to be doing is broadening our approach. And this is a little bit off topic, but not really, since I'm talking to people both at the federal and state level. When we are trying to figure out how to diversify our staff, one of the things that we need to do is identify the fact that there are many other voices and other impacts, as well as transferable skills. And so I am not a data scientist and I am not an ocean scientist. That is one thing that I always tell my staff. But what I can do is help to implement. And part of that is identifying what are those transferable skills that can help broaden and make our programs more impactful. So that may mean looking at some of the qualifications and being a little bit more open-minded about what it means for somebody to be qualified to take a position on and help us look at things from a new framework. The other thing that I want to talk about is staying within our swim lanes. I have found something to be slightly challenging. And so the reason why we're talking today a little bit about bringing ocean and commercial and communities together is when I was the Marco chair in 2019, it was an incredible year. It was an incredible period. We were really regaining our stride. We had just worked with our federal partners and tribal partners to stand up MACO and strengthen the impact that the entity would have. It's a powerhouse committee charged with broadening our impact through partnership. And we worked to stabilize funding because of the generous, and we needed to also stabilize funding because the generous investments that were given to us from the Betty Moore Foundation were coming to an end. And ROP funding at that time was just not a thing. There was also a great shift that was occurring among the states to align on so many exciting opportunities and give us the ability to develop our strategic plan. And at that time, there was no doubt to me that the value and the benefits of collaborating on a regional scale to advance shared priorities across the Mid-Atlantic were the key. But as I said, I served as the chair and I'm not an ocean scientist. But there is the value of bringing in folks who have strong ability to coordinate with others, bring partners in, and move the needle. According to the UN, over 20 million people per year on average are displaced due to increasing severe weather patterns. And this number is expected to only increase. Also, migration is now a part of our reality. And so millions of people in the US have been and will be in the future continuing to move and be forced to move due to impacts of climate change, such as severe heat, drought, and flooding. Where will they go and how can we plan for them and develop solutions for our neighbors is something that we need to do. And we need to encourage and support collective long-range community-driven planning efforts by developing and providing realistic scenarios for communities to consider as the environment around them continues to change. We also need to share our best practices to support communities at greater climate risk in the near future. And finally, we need to engage younger generations to come up with new ways to prepare for and mitigate climate impacts, which can inform our long-range planning, since we will eventually leave our region in their hands as stewards. These are all suggestions, which includes being more inclusive with the way that we identify what are those transferable skills we need to bring in to make our programs more impactful. And so with that, it's important that we not only think and limit ourselves to our own wheelhouse and the space in which we operate and the space in which we're comfortable. A few years ago, during the very first Mako Ocean Forum, Mike Snyder and I presented on critical infrastructure and resiliency. And at the time, it felt increasingly so that there was this disconnect between folks who work in the ocean space and folks who work in the coastal space, and almost a hesitancy to merge the two because one, the work was so great to start, no one wanted to jump into anybody else's swim lanes or step on their toes. And, we just don't have time to not coordinate. And I'm so happy that over the last few years, that it has not only become more apparent, but there is that opening and that linking of arms. One of the things I talk about with my team is the importance of scaffolding our work with communities as we're talking about climate resiliency and adaptation. And so that we are collectively building the community's capacity to talk about deeper and deeper ways and actions for adaptation. So I was thinking about that Ocean Forum and thinking about the scaffolding effect that we're trying to do within the state and how we really do need to bridge that so that we are not just working within our wheelhouse, but that we are becoming true change agents collectively as a real force. The effect of climate change is only going to grow. And so we just don't have the time to afford that, but also we really do need each other. And we need to find a way of bridging that. And this Ocean Forum is one of them, and Mako as an entity is one of them. And you all may also remember that last year when I introduced the keynote speaker, BOEM director Amanda Lefton, I was extremely pregnant. And so now I have two sons who are really my guiding and North Star. And I suppose what I've learned through this parenting experience, is that we are here just for a short period of time. And everything that we do, how we use our time, must be considered precious. And so I have been applying as much as I can of my work on ways to make things better for them. My 6-year-old said to me recently, he said, "Mama, when I grow up, will there still be water?" He's very much aware of how important this earth is and how careful we need to be with our actions in taking care of it. One thing I say at the Department of State is that our agency links arms with local governments, and we meet them where they are, and we take them a little bit further than they intended on going. When we're talking about climate resiliency, and we're talking about it from a regional level, sometimes we need to drag some of our partners with them and not just bring them a little bit further. And sometimes it's just a matter of us opening that discussion and coming up with real solutions. And so that is my challenge to all of you, to make sure that the time that we have together, our limited time here on this earth, is very much focused on climate. And also to make sure that we're not just simply staying within our circle. We really do need to benefit from one another and move this from a conversation to real action. And so, like I said, I'm an implementer. I'm not an ocean scientist. And so, all I can think about is what we need to be doing at a micro and macro level. All that consumes my mind is what I need to fill in with the scaffolding of resiliency actions, both at the state level and at the regional level. And I hope that we continue to partner, not just in discussion, but really putting together firm planning activities and marching orders so that we can achieve many of our goals, not just at the state level, but at the regional level and nationwide. We really need to reverse the course here and make things just a little bit more palatable for the future generations. Spatial ocean planning is a complicated job, and we certainly have our work cut out for us. But I am confident that this collaborative, multi-dimension, interdisciplinary approach that we are continuing to build is a path forward to equitably protect the environment and economically vibrant areas in our region, and to find common ground and compromise for ocean use as well, helping our communities to grow in new directions as we continue to adapt and migrate and mitigate climate change. So in the spirit of cross-border collaboration, in which this entire effort is based, I'm looking forward to hearing from MACO members, partners, and stakeholders over the next 2 days. And I want to encourage all of you to follow up with each other. Reach out to presenters for further discussions and talk to one another to continue conversations. Do not be shy and do not feel like you will step on someone's toes. The Ocean Forum is not just a 2-day session that will solve all of our problems. Solutions and compromise require ongoing conversations and efforts for meaningful advancement. I challenge you to work through the complications to find solutions. Let's keep this momentum going. Let's leave nothing off the table. And I thank you so very much for your time.
Great. Thank you so much, Keisha. Those were wonderful remarks, and I think very inspiring for all of us as we think about the work ahead of us and the discussions we're going to have over the next couple of days. I especially like that thought, and I would just love to highlight for our participants here the thought of connections and of bringing connections between the not just the coastal and offshore, but also federal, state, tribal, which is what we're here to do as MACO, and also connections between different disciplines. And I think Keisha, you spoke to this very eloquently about how coming at it from not being an ocean scientist, you have a different perspective, but you also have this spirit of kind of collaboration and partnership from that past experience and that other world of doing things, and kind of bringing that into the fore. And that sort of diverse perspective and that new perspective can sometimes help shake us up a little bit. And I know, speaking personally, you've done a great job in shaking us up in our office, and really in positive ways, and getting us to think differently, to think more collaboratively, to kind of think about how can we do things better, how can we be more inclusive, how can we be more proactive and thoughtful, and how can we, as an implementer, as you said, how can we do stuff, how can we get things done? So if you wouldn't mind indulging me a minute, what do you see in your experience, and given that you've been in the ocean world, and we've been fortunate to have you there for the last few years, what are maybe some of the key challenges or even opportunities you see coming from kind of the community development side and coming into the ocean sphere in engaging people, motivating people, in really trying to take that action and take some urgent momentum forward in the realm of climate change and renewable energy? Just any thoughts you might have on where should we really be headed, or are there things that we can maybe do a little bit differently, or specific areas that we may want to start to push into?
Yeah, I actually think this is a great time. I mean, look, I think many states have been working with their communities on a wide range of resiliency actions and activities. We should all be encouraged and energized by the younger generations, which all keep us, focused and hold our feet to the fire, as they should. But nowadays, there is a lot more awareness than there used to be. I think the thing is, we have not necessarily harnessed that awareness and energy coming from communities who are willing to look at things differently. We also have to consider the timeframes with which we're engaging them and when we can make the most of it. So one of the things, Mike, that we do at the state, especially our agency, because we are planners, is that, we need to plan before the event happens so that we have a package of activities that we can roll out, that we've already talked with our community partners, with our federal partners with, to make sure that they're implementable. But we need those packages ready for when the moment is right. And unfortunately, sometimes the moment is right when an actual act has happened, when there has been an unfortunate weather event. We need those things to be packaged and ready. We can't start the work when that activity happens. And sometimes even in the state and federal level, we start to slow down a little bit. We talk about communicating and talking. And that's why I say, no. We have to go beyond talking. We need to have that plan. We need to have it teed up, and we need to be ready to go for when there's a parting, for when there's great infrastructure funding coming out of the federal government, for when there is an alignment, even at the state level, to move through some legislation that will help us really affect change. And I think the other thing that, going back to my comments a little bit on DEIJ, is, meaningful engagement is not a touch point. It is really looking inward about what is lacking and where we need help, and identifying that what we need help with may not come from the expertise we traditionally surround ourselves with. Those voices, the diversity of voices, are not just great to have when we're having a public information session. We need to take that information when we say, wow, that was a really great idea, or wow, look at the way that this person was able to really inspire the people in the room, and we need to bring them in. And we need to say, you did something really great during these 3-hour public hearing session, but now we want you to help us look at what our plans and programs are, and what input can you provide to us. And we need to be really serious about that. So we need to really sort of take advantage of this period where everybody's sort of doing this introspection, but we need to put that into an action plan. It needs to go beyond the talk. And then I think, we are, as a profession, I have a hard time building in and getting more staff, more diverse staff. And part of that is that's just not the pool, right? That's just not the pool of professionals that are coming out of college. Most of the time, somebody may take a track that's much more, maybe community organizing, and maybe sort of more on the social justice platform. But those are all transferable skills. And so we really need to look at it that way. I mean, I always like to be upfront and honest with folks about what my background is. But my pursuit of passions goes beyond just the community level, because I am so much aware of how these larger activities, including what's going on in the ocean and the industry and the science that's coming out, how that's going to affect communities. We all need to take our targeted work, and we just need to zoom out and learn at the macro level, and then figure out how we can incorporate it in. So there have been, especially over COVID, there's been just a tremendous amount of free webinars, conferences, all of these things. And what I always say to my team is, yes, you can absolutely go to this training. You have to bring something back, and you have to make a recommendation of how we are going to adjust or change or include something that you learned. So it's not just a matter of learning. It is always a matter of action. We always have to be thinking about what this will mean and how we can effectuate some lesson learned or some new data, so that we are applying it to action-oriented, implementable steps.
That's great. And thank you so much for that, Keisha. I know these are things that we struggle with daily, and as you well know, and it's so wonderful to have your insight and your perspective. It really does add a lot to the conversation, and I think it's a great testimony to what having a different perspective can do in terms of moving us forward. So thank you again. We really appreciate you sharing your insight with us this morning, getting us started with our forum this year. And we appreciate you, again, having been our past chair, coming back to the ocean space and continuing to provide that knowledge and insight to us. So thank you. I know you never really left. We won't let you leave.
I will never leave. I think this is just, honestly, it's so important. It's so fantastic. The work too of the ENGOs bringing it in. It's just been really fantastic. And I think the forum is such an important way of bringing stuff together. I also just want to just thank everybody on how we have not let COVID stop us. This is and the fact that everything is online and people can always look back at the previous sessions. I just think it's such a great offering to folks. And I do look forward to for us all being in person, but it feels to me that we haven't missed out too much, and that's because of the great work of the team over there. So thank you so much for having me. It really has been an honor working in this space and figuring out how, my experience can be best put to use as I talk to people who I think are outrageously intelligent and are just so knowledgeable in areas that I'm not as aware. I'm just glad for any little bit of my skill sets that can transfer over and be of support. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Keisha. And with that, I think we're going to move over into our next agenda item. So Tony, I believe we have a break coming up, but I will turn it over to you to help lead us to the next agenda piece. Thank you.